decided to get a little cozy. It's freezing in Chicago. I moved my whole setup to my living room, and also it's just giving a little bit of a better like vibe in my living room. It's a lot of sunlight in here, so it just makes me happy. So we're continuing on with this series of my court case into part 2. So we left off in the last video regarding, you know, how everything imploded, and I was told about all the stuff going on, right? So now we're going to be entering into the actual case start and meeting the judge and getting all of those ins and outs moving along. Entering into the court system officially. So I needed to, like, of course, explain a couple of the court orders that were submitted as a part of my case. And yeah, so let's start there. So a couple of the court orders that were submitted once I retained my attorney and we submit the motions. The first motion that we submitted was a motion to restrict the parenting time. And that was pursuant of Section 60 of the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. And I have to like reference my notes because legalese, I don't want to get anything wrong. That was the first motion that we submitted. And then the second one that we submitted was for the relief of child support, because obviously, given that I had learned that Mr. Mann was working a whole job and not demoted as he told me, my child support payment should have definitely been significantly more, like doubled, and I wanted that money back. So that is what I submitted, right? So the motions like list everything. The first motion to restrict the parenting time listed, of course, the domestic violence allegations, the fake address, like that was the fake address was the main like culprit of the case, right? And then everything else came, you know, crashing down once, you know, that was all revealed. So it was like the fake address, the lack of integrity with that, of course the domestic violence, the drug use, the alcohol use, and everything else that Miss Mama's decided to share with me. So boom, we entered into court, right? And what this means for me, you know, I really didn't think about it, but basically with the restriction of parenting time, that means that now I have my son like around the clock 24/7. And I don't think I mentally prepared myself for that. Like, I'm perfectly okay with that, right? But clearly that's not the intent here. The intent or desire was for change behavior on his father's end so that my son is not exposed to anything that Miss Girl decided to tell me about. So I just did not prepare myself to have my son 24/7. So I had to like fly my mama in and help me out and things like that, which totally just like rearranged my life. And it was okay. Like, I mean, I just had to come to terms with that. But anyway, I will say this, before I even start talking about some of the legalese, like, I hated this. I did not feel good about restricting parenting time for my son and his father because my son needs his father, right? And he adores his father and vice versa. However, again, let me stress, like, I was more concerned about the behaviors happening around my son that were maybe indirectly impacting my child, and I would never know that, right? And had I not been told of some of the things that were going on in that household, it would have never been a concern of mine. But because, again, of my history with my ex-husband, I absolutely knew that I had to do something about it. And it's a slippery slope because I feel like I would have been a very irresponsible parent if I did not look into this. Once we enter like the restriction of parenting time, I personally reached out and I was just like, listen, you can see your son. Like, it might have to be supervised. We can meet at a park, but I am in no way keeping you from physical contact with your child. We're just going to have some, you know, changes in how we are approaching this as we co-parent. And he didn't necessarily care to meet in the middle or compromise on that. So he chose not to see him at all. That was his choice, okay? I never took that right away from him as far as being able to spend any type of time with him. It was just the overnights and the alone time, and then I didn't even know who he was around, who he was living with, and all those things. So it is what it is, but you know, I gave an open door for him to find a way to meet with our son and have time with him in a way that was okay for that moment, and he chose otherwise. He didn't call him, he didn't FaceTime him, he didn't see him. So boom, he declined. That's not my business, but that was all on him and his decision. So I guess in his mind, you know, maybe under his, you know, I don't know what he was thinking, but my suggestion or thought with that is that maybe he felt that if I don't get to see my son in my way, you know, I'm not going to see him at all, or this is not the way that I want to engage with my child, so I am not doing this like this, whatever. His business. So the initial orders were entered in October of 2022. And then we had to engage the guardian ad litem, right? And we'll refer to the guardian ad litem as a GAL. So when I talk about the GAL in this whole series, I am referring to the guardian ad litem, okay? So that is the attorney very much appointed as a means to advocate for the child, right? So they are the voice of the child, because of course my son cannot, you know, speak up for himself, or he can't really assess what's best for him, right? He's not of age, especially in my case, he's not of age, right? So the guardian ad litem takes both sides, you know, stories, thoughts, feelings, and then try to meet in the middle. And these GALs are appointed when family disputes are highly contentious and there's a divorce, or when the parents disagree and they can't come to a middle ground on their own. Like the GAL comes into play to play interference and say, okay, let's focus on what's best for the child, right? But be mindful that the GAL is not an extension of whatever agreement for fees or anything that you have with your attorney. This is a completely separate charge. Under normal circumstances, you and your co-parent will be splitting that cost. In my case, that is exactly what happened. We split the cost. In some cases, I've heard and I've seen that, you know, sometimes one parent can afford it or whatever, and then one parent forks all of the costs, or depending on what the situation is. In our case, we completely split that cost for the GAL in half, but it's another expense. Totally sucks, okay? So the role that they play, the GAL plays, is pretty significant, right? And I honestly probably put too much faith in how the GAL is supposed to work in favor of my child's best interest. Way too much faith in it, because our particular GAL was terrible, and I alluded to that in the last video, and my goodness, he was horrible. And I'll explain as the case goes on. You will understand why he was horrible. So my son was 2 years old, so the GAL wasn't able to interview him or anything like that. So he kind of just had to assess whatever we felt, right, as parents, and then see what the situation was, the evidence and all of that stuff, and then take it from there. So boom, we get to all of the things that need to happen as far as entering the judgments and whatever. So that's October 2022, and then we presented the motions to the judge November of 2022. November 7th of 2022 is when we presented all the motions to the judge. So the motions that I presented of the restriction of parenting time, and then of course the child support, we presented. At this point, on November 7th of 2022, the opposing side, my ex-husband and his attorney, didn't even respond. So they never responded to anything that we submitted, which why wouldn't you be responding at this point? So nothing was responded by them. And so, okay, so that because there was no response and there was nothing to really evaluate at that point, the judge granted the restriction of parenting time at that moment. And then He also appointed the GAL, and officially I learned who the GAL was. And then we went forward with, okay, what's next and what's the next status, right? At the point that the parenting time was restricted, there was absolutely nothing that the judge granted my ex-husband at the time being. Because of the allegations and because of everything that was going on, the judge decided to be very conservative because there was domestic violence, and he just granted nothing at that point as far as what the opposing party was requesting, because they had nothing in writing. They provided no responses to the motions. And, within the court, if you don't submit anything, you don't, kind of follow up with anything that has been filed, then you're kind of leaving it as, oh, so this happened, right? So, for instance, if I say, oh my God, he hit me and da-da-da-da, and I submit something to back up that statement and it's entered within the court. So what happens at that point is that the court takes it in. It's not saying it's true or false. It's just saying this is acknowledged within the court. And if there's nothing on the other side that comes in, it's treated as true until proven otherwise, right? So because my ex-husband provided no response, and his counsel providing no response, them coming during a status to say, that's not fair and this is not right, means absolutely nothing, because why haven't you filed anything? Why haven't you responded to anything? So you got to do that. Do the due diligence, right? So boom. That happens. The GAL officially gets appointed on the case. And I think I got a little ahead of introducing the GAL, but that happened on November 7th. The GAL gets appointed to the case. Thanksgiving passes by, and then between Thanksgiving and December, entering December, I have my interview with the GAL. So my interview with the GAL happened December 7th, and it was a complete waste of time. It was a complete waste of time because I spent so much of the time with him explaining everything that happened. Mind you, once the GAL is appointed, they are provided every single piece of evidence. They are provided all the motions entered. They are provided everything. And so my attorney and I provided him everything, okay? There is a case file, and we upload documents in there, and everything was there. This man never looked at anything that we provided, which is the most frustrating thing ever. I'm like, yo, we literally gave you everything. Everything is there. How did you not look at this? Why wouldn't you look at this? So most of the time I spent was me going through every single thing that happened, how it started, what was told to me, the text messages, the conversations, everything. Mind you, he has the screenshots, he has the text messages, he has the photos, he has everything, and he looked at nothing. He looked at nothing, which was utterly frustrating, right? So that just tells you a lot about people and their work ethic, and yeah. So that's that. So anyway, he interviews me, and then he also kind of looks at my son and the environment, and we have to set up a separate meeting just for my son and him to have interaction. And it's really lackluster. I mean, my son is playing with his toys, and we're all on Zoom, and he's just like, oh, okay, hi buddy, how are you? Kind of just small talk with my son, and my son is looking at him like, I don't know you, but just kind of engaging, and that was that. So the interaction with my son was very minimal, just because he's so young, and there was really nothing that the GAL can really take from that interaction. So boom, that happens. So two things that the GAL kind of irritated me about was, of course, his lack of follow through. But then weirdly, during my conversation with him, he asked me to set up time for him to talk to the paramour, Miss Mama's over there. He asked me to set up time for him and my ex-husband's, I guess, ex-girlfriend at the time, because they had broken up a little bit when she kicked him out, but whatever, so he wanted me to set up the time, not him set up the time, not him reach out to her. He wanted me to set up the time, and I'm just like, sir, why aren't you reaching out? Like, you have her number, here's all the information. Why would you ask me to set up the time to speak with her? Like, this makes no sense. So automatically, I was giving him the suspect eyes. Like, sir, this is like no bueno, okay? I've already told you that this is the woman that was involved in my marriage. Like, her and I aren't bestie boos or anything like that. She gave me this information. Yeah, you should be reaching out to her independently. I don't know why you're reaching out. But the thing that sucks about all of this is that time is just going by, right? So we got to think about the timeline here. We're now in November. This happened early October. This woman has had time to have my ex-husband in her ear, or they're fighting back and forth, you know, so nothing is as fresh as far as all the emotion anymore. And that is exactly what worked against me, because homegirl pulled it, okay? And the reason why I think she ended up pulling will end up coming out even more, because there's so much nonsense. But I was super irritated with the fact that he was asking me to reach out to her to schedule the time for him to have a conversation with her. Why? Why me? Why am I doing that heavy lift? Like, why am I spending thousands of dollars for you to do your job and investigate things as you need to, and then you're asking me to reach out to schedule meetings for you? Like, why? Right? So that was a big problem for me. So the second part to this was, it's so ghetto, but my ex-husband unfortunately had to have a home visit conducted, because now he was already kicked out of his home with her. And then I didn't believe that whatever address he would have given me, or whatever lease, anything was going to be true at this point. So the judge ordered a home visit to make sure that wherever my ex-husband said he's living, he's actually living in. So the GAL had to conduct that and, pretty much do like a home inspection, running water, make sure that my son has an area for himself. And then we had to start getting our financial affidavits together. And what financial affidavits are essentially needed for is for the child support, right? So when you are submitting a request for child support, depending on the level of contention of your case, you might need to provide a financial affidavit, which kind of lists out your expenses for you and your child, your assets, your liabilities, everything, what you got in the bank, everything. And then you submit that to the court so that they can make some calculations, and then bada bing, bada boom, a number gets calculated accordingly. I think Illinois, to me, is more neutral. Like, it doesn't lean towards the mother or the father. They kind of lean into involvement from both sides, and they definitely advocate for fathers being involved. But I can't say that it's like a mother preferred state or father preferred state. Like, it truly tries to be as neutral as possible depending on the circumstances of your case. So when it comes to child support, it's really like who makes what, and meeting in the middle. And essentially your child should be having the same type of lifestyle that you would have otherwise had if you were together living in the same house. So even though we are divorced, and that's that, whatever lifestyle my child would have had with us being in the house together, he should realize that lifestyle, us being separate. And that's basically how child support works, right? So that's a kind of good thing, because, well, when you're married, like, you're realizing this life with someone and you have children into that marriage, you should not have to have such a jolt in what the lifestyle you would be living. And trust me, it wasn't like I was, Real Housewives of Chicago out here. Like, it wasn't like that, but we were both doing and building together. So in those instances, when you think about child support, at least in the state of Illinois, that's the thought process around it, right? So it is the most, financial affidavits, you feel naked, because you have to give all this information. You have to give pay stubs. You have to give all your bank accounts. You have to give, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to give that information. You have to give everything. And when you are separated from someone, unless it's an amicable separation, you legit like don't want this person to know all your business. Like, I hated the process, but it is kind of what it is. So I, of course, complied and did my part and submitted everything. So we had 21 days from the date of the November status that was held November 7th to submit all of our documentation. So that would bring us into December, right? Let me just say this. I submitted all my documents on time, of course. My ex-husband submitted nothing. So there goes the games, right? And it's important to see how your ex or whomever is moving in this space, because it is going to tell you exactly how this case is going to go for you, and you're going to have to calculate the amount of time, money that you're going to be investing into this, because the other side wants to play games. And the other like sucky part about that is that they're probably doing these things to delay the case on purpose, to either, you know, dry you out financially, frustrate you, or all of the above. But just realize that those are the things that can happen, and you should have measures in place within the court and with your attorney to make sure that you account for those type of shenanigans, because that is exactly what was happening in my case. Now we are back up for status on December 20th, right? And during this hearing, during this hearing, given the drug and alcohol allegations, we had to, address that, right? So, oh my God. So, first of all, financial affidavit, mine are in, his are not. So that's a delay there. So we have to let the, judge know, hey, there's nothing that has been provided here. And I think the piss poor excuse that his counsel provided was that, oh, it's the holidays coming up and and we were like, really, sir? Like, come on. First of all, this man is living in his house, his new house by himself, no distraction. He can give all of the information he needs expeditiously. He chose not to, right? So boom, that's one thing that we had to address, is that they had not responded to anything regarding the case at all at that point. They also had not provided any financial statements or anything like that, and pretty much have done nothing on their end. So all the work, all the lifting, all the court entering orders, whatever, has all been submitted by me at this point, which is not a good look, but whatever. That's what he decided to do. That's on him. So to address the drug and alcohol, the judge decided that he was going to summon a random drug and alcohol test for my ex-husband only, right? My ex-husband didn't like that. So he tells the GAL during his interview, oh, she does drugs and alcohol too, and she needs to take a drug test. So based off that alone, the GAL suggested that I needed to take a drug and alcohol test. And I'm like, what? There are zero allegations against me. He never responded to anything regarding this. No motions, nothing in writing from him stating this at all. But the GAL recommends that we both take a drug test. And the judge is like, kind of recognizes the games being played here. So the judge says, well, I'll tell you this. Both of them can get tested, and I will recommend that if any of the tests come back negative for either parent, the person that has the negative test needs to reimburse, assuming that there's a positive test, right? So let's say I came back with a positive drug test or alcohol test, then I would have to reimburse him if his was negative and vice versa. And if we both were negative, then great. We just paid for our own test. So I'm hot. I am pissed because this ain't nothing but some games being played. However, I decide not to fight it, because what's the point? I know that I'm not doing anything. I know that I'm not taking drugs, and I'm not, drinking, 20 bottles of wine every day or whatever. So it's just like, man, this is ridiculous, but let's just go with it so that we can get it over with, right? And then the other part that pissed me off about this is that my ex-husband tried to paint me, well, it's not even my ex-husband, right? It was him and his attorney, and I'm sure that this was a tactic from his attorney that I was basically being a jealous, raging ex-wife, and I was mad because he was with the woman that he cheated on me with during our marriage, and this was the whole reason why we were entered into this case. Not because the girl reached out to me regarding domestic violence, not because I have pictures from her regarding her scars and her, injuries from whatever tussle they had, not because of that, but merely because I am such an angry, raging ex-wife. Shenanigans. Shenanigans, shenanigans, shenanigans. And when you are in a court case like this, like when, you're clearly like duking it out, you have to be very mindful of the tactics that are being played to get you to respond in a way, to get you riled up, to get you to like just lose it. They want you to crash out. They want you to show a side of you that will be like, see, there it goes. You don't give them that. So you need to really do work, do breath work, therapy, all the things to make sure that you don't get caught up in the minutia of what they're trying to suggest who you are. Okay? So none of that works because the judge kind of sees it, and he's just like, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you can say that all day and night, but there are allegations of domestic violence, and I understand there's evidence here. So the GAL is going to have to investigate this and look into this, right? So all of that to say, the judge kind of dismisses that little comment about me being an angry ex-wife, and he's like, no, we're going to look into this. So the GAL is responsible for looking into this. So we have to take a drug test pretty much immediately. I think, within days or whatever. Like it's literally like a turnaround time like this. So we take the drug test. The judge definitely had concerns because of the allegations, and we have to take the drug test. And he upholds even during the December 20th hearing, or status rather, he upholds the restriction for parenting time. And I think the shenanigans like in between kind of just didn't help my ex-husband, because it's like, instead of you focusing on the time with your son, you're focusing on trying to paint me a certain way, right? And then, we have to take the drug test. So then the drug test administrator, they reach out to her. We have to go to this center. Like the turnaround time is like quick, right? So he orders us to take the drug test, and literally I think it was like the next day. Let me see. Let me look at the records. Yeah. So essentially what happens is I think we were up for status in December 20th, and then we had to take the drug test within, 48 hours of that. And then the next thing is that the holidays were coming up, so the judge suggests that for Christmas, he wants to give time to he wants to give time to, my ex-husband for the holidays so he can have time with our son, which I have no problem with. So he asked me what's the schedule, or what can we work out? And I let him know, daytime, nighttime, whatever. So he decides to grant him an overnight. So I have part of Christmas with my son. I enter into Christmas with my son, so Christmas Eve into Christmas, and then he picks him up, and then I get him the next day. So just one overnight is granted for Christmas, and that's it. And then we go back to the normal restriction, right? So that's what pretty much happened for the holidays. And then we were kind of following pretty much no parenting time on his hand from that day forward. I want to say, if memory serves me correctly, he was able to have just Tuesday nights, just one night a week with our son, just as a lead-in after the home visit was conducted and all of that. So yes, that's what happened. So he got him for Christmas, and then there was nothing that happened in between Christmas and January. So our next hearing was scheduled for January, and at that time we were going to be visiting more parenting time, right? So from October to Christmas, there was nothing. Then he got Christmas Day. That was one day. And then from Christmas Day on up until the next hearing, there was nothing again, right? So I have my son 100% of the time as well. Based on that timeline, we enter into like the holidays, and in the meantime, I'm supposed to be working on getting Miss Mamas to talk to the GAL, which was so freaking frustrating. I'm trying to get her, reach out to her, and I speak to her on the phone, I think twice. And she's like, the GAL wants to talk to me? Why would the GAL want to talk to me? And I'm like, girl, you know why the GAL wants to talk to you, okay? Mind you, she knows this process, because while we were on the phone that day, she explained to me that in her state of Virginia, like, she also had a domestic violence, some type of order or restraining order of protection against her ex, which is the father of her child. She shared that with me. So her acquaintance with domestic violence isn't new here, right? So she knows why the GAL would be appointed. She was like, I don't understand why you're going with this, because when I had my case, the GAL the judge kind of dismissed it as, there was nothing done to your child, so, you are not going to be able to protect her in any way, so you just need to let this go. That was kind of her mood or her vibe towards me, and I was just like, oh my God, this girl is flipping on me. She's flipping the script on me. Right? So that let me know that my ex-husband's like working. He was in her ear working her, because the way her tone and everything started to shift. And the fact that she's like basically a battered woman and very familiar with domestic violence, to me just kind of says that whatever healing that she should have been doing or should have done at that point in her life, to have an experience before with the father of her child, to now my ex-husband is like, my girl, like, how could you even question why I'm going through all of this, right? You're the one who brought it to me. You're the one who shared that you had experience with domestic violence. Look at this right here. Now you want to just play it like I'm just overreacting and, this is all in vain because it's just unnecessary and blah, 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 blah. So, it should have never been my responsibility to get in contact with her and get, her and the GAL connected, but I was doing my damnness. And I think I started to lose it once I started to realize that she was kind of changing her tone on all of the things that she decided to share with me, because I was just like, girl, yeah. So boom, that happened, right? Anyway, so give a little bit more light onto what some of my petitions were in my my motions to restrict parenting time. So for parenting time to reestablish, what I was asking for was for him to attend anger management courses and domestic violence classes, and then also, figure out what this drug and alcohol, situation was turning out to be before we can establish parenting time again, right? Those were my asks based on what I experienced with him in marriage and based on what homegirl decided to tell me, right? And just knowing what I know about who he has been towards women. And I was like, nope, until these things happen, I'm not willing to let go of these asks. So those were my asks. That doesn't mean that it was going to happen, but those were my asks. And some of those things definitely were granted, and then some of the things, other things were kind of, they kind of got lost in the process. But yes, some of it was granted to me. To say, hey, I really want this to be implemented before he could get parenting time. There needs to be a whole investigation that happens before we move forward. And that is why, unfortunately, like, you go to trial and you end up having to go through a process of this over time, because getting a child set up and all this stuff takes time. Also, you're trying to mediate in between. And for us, the mediation attempts were just a waste of time as well. And I'll talk about that in the next video of the series, because homeboy was just not willing. He was not willing to just try to meet in the middle, compromise, or put an end to this at all. I don't know if it was ego. I don't know if he was just angry. So whatever. So yes, All of that has to happen. And of course, with trials, testimonies, subpoenas, and all of that stuff have to happen. And then, you get your evidence and boom, get to moving on that. So boom, that's where we were at that point. So when we get to the next status in January, right? I had went to Panama for vacation with my son for New Year's and things like that. January 12th comes along and boom, we are at the next status. So by then the drug and alcohol tests come back, and of course my results were all negative. No drugs, no alcohol, nothing. My ex-husband's, though, came back positive. They came back positive, double the amount of the suggested alcohol consumption. That is precisely what the drug administrator pointed out, that while alcohol, is not illegal, like his consumption level was way beyond what anybody would recommend. So homeboy was wasted, okay? And I'm just like, sir, why would you, this is coming, right? You can't even just be chill for a little bit. With regard to the drugs, there's no conclusive test for shrooms or certain psychedelics. So that came back inconclusive, which totally whatever. But the alcohol was what the focus was, because the judge was like, ooh, come on, man. His attorney tried to say, oh, he went to a holiday party. A glass of wine is just going to mess up his parenting time. And the drug administrator was just like, no. It's not a glass of wine. This is like a bottle of whiskey or something. Like, this was double the recommended amount of alcohol consumption, right? It wasn't that she didn't say that verbatim, but it was basically suggesting that no. This is not a little sip or nothing. Like, this is double the amount. And it said on the data, it literally said in whatever, however they use it to measure. I can't remember what type of measuring component they use, but it said it on the results, double the recommended consumption. It definitely said that. So based on that, the judge is like, yeah, so we are not extending any additional time right now. This is where things are going to stay. And then we will have another hearing or status rather. But he has to take another randomized drug and alcohol test. So that is where we kind of left things. And then we talked about the fact that he had yet to provide any of his documents. He had yet to provide any response. He had yet to do anything pretty much as it relates to the motions filed or anything like that. So we were still in a holding place waiting for their response for everything that was submitted. So because we couldn't really argue anything, it was another status which delayed and gave us another date. By that point, yes, the GAL had already spoken to Miss Mamas over there, and of course, she just said, oh, he's a good father, and I was just angry, and that was that. So, of course, that was, all reversed. Her testimony was completely changed based on what she shared with me. So then that was not something I was willing to let go, because I'm like, legit, I have evidence. Legit, she sent me pictures. Legit, she said this. Legit, she's the reason why we're here. So there was something happening in the background between him and her, him being my ex-husband and her, as to why she was now flipping the script. Okay? So for the sake of time, I'll leave it there. So we end at the January 2023 status. And then now we're entering into the next phase of, do we go to trial, or do we try to mediate, or what happens with the allegations of the domestic violence? And of course, the next steps, now that we got a positive drug and alcohol test. What do we do now? So that is the next phase of the series. So I'll just pause it there because I'm tired and I need to drink some water, and that's it for now. So I'll catch y'all next time, okay? Hasta luego. Bye. Okay, I think I need to go closer. Okay, so we're back. Kinda, sorta. Okay.